Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join today. I know many or most of you already. For those I don't know, I'm Ella August. I'm faculty in the School of Public Health at the University of Michigan and part of the Castor Career Enhancement Corps. This presentation is on academic editing with ChatGPT, and I have an overview slide coming up that will outline the content in a bit more detail. Some quick housekeeping notes. Many of these probably are already familiar. If you have the bandwidth, it would be great if you could keep your camera on. Please keep your microphone muted unless you're speaking. We are recording this and we will circulate the recording afterward. I'll also share my slides. So if you could please avoid using any additional recording devices. Feel free to type your questions into the chat at any time. I think there's plenty of time. There will be at the end to also entertain any additional questions. Molly is going to keep an eye on the chat. Molly, feel free to just jump in at an opportune time if something comes up. Before I start, I wanted to thank the Castor team and the Career Enhancement Corps in particular who are supporting this webinar. Thank you. And also, before we get going, I do use the term generative AI or Gen AI throughout this presentation. Gen AI, just very simply, it's a type of AI that learns from examples and then generates new text, images, videos, all kinds of content. A large language model is a type of generative AI that works with language specifically. And ChatGPT is a type of large language model. So I tend to use the broad term generative AI or Gen AI to describe the type of tech, when I'm referring broadly to the type of technology that ChatGPT is. In terms of scope, there's obviously a huge AI landscape right now. It's growing every day in terms of different types of technology and their functionality. I'll only be focusing on a single Gen AI technology in this presentation, ChatGPT. My hope is that the content that we cover will feel relevant for similar, Gen AI and large language models that you may be using for academic editing and even for writing. So I have an overview slide here in the talk. I provide guidance and specific examples for using ChatGPT for academic editing. But because I think at this point, many of us are still trying to sort of suss out the AI landscape and form some basic judgments about it, I also include quite a bit of context, hopefully not too much context, to help you consider, sort of whether, how much, and what activities you might use ChatGPT for academic writing. I'm going to start by setting the stage a little bit. I'll talk about professional standards, considerations for data privacy, and tips about how to keep your data private. Then I'll show how to edit your academic papers with ChatGPT, example of how to get feedback on your writing, like a peer review. I have a quick example of how to generate alt text for your figures, since that will be a national sort of requirement in a few months for all images, for electronic documents. And finally, I'll give some tips for effective prompt engineering so that you can get the most out of ChatGPT. Let me also add that I am not a ChatGPT expert. I stepped into this space because you sort of have to be in this space if your work is focused on academic writing, which mine is, because it's really just part of the landscape now. So I will do my best to answer questions. However, I may need to circle back if I don't know the answer. I also welcome your tips and feedback as well. Okay. So setting the stage a little bit, this is data on researchers' opinions about using generative AI for academic writing activities. It was published in Nature News in May. And it shows that researchers are really starting to embrace AI for academic, for developing their publications. And if you look at the top bar, you can see that overall, 90% of respondents thought it was okay to use generative AI for copy editing as long as the author fully discloses their use. And again, looking at the top bar, a total of 71% of researchers have either used generative AI to edit their paper or would be willing to. And when you think about how difficult it is to get academics to agree on anything, it's really pretty amazing to see this type of agreement. This is objective data from a study that looked at journal article abstracts and methods sections from 10 cancer journals from 2022 to 2024. And they analyzed the text for AI-generated content, and they found this huge increase starting in 2023, just a few months after GPT was released. ChatGPT was released in November of 2022. So the green bars show AI-detected content in the abstract text. The darker shade means a greater likelihood that AI was used. So the point of this slide is to show that a lot of academics are using generative AI for their publications. And I'm sure it's only increased since the end of the data collection period for this study, which was in 2020, in the last year. So there are obviously many, many implications of the rise in use. And I'm going to quickly just highlight two here. First, ChatGPT is changing the way we use language. So one example you may have heard about is the use of the word delve. It has skyrocketed. So you can see I've circled this graph here in the top left. This shows the usage over time from 2012 to 2024. And you can see it's went way, way up just after ChatGPT was released. So that little black line at the tip of the arrow is the counterfactual for the word. So it's the estimated use in the absence of ChatGPT. So it turns out that AI chatbots overrepresent words like delve because the training was outsourced to geographic areas where those words are more common. And a recent study in Scientific American shows that this is sort of bleeding over into our regular language as well. So more Americans are using these words in spoken conversation, and undoubtedly they are also making their way into our human-generated writing as well. So this is to say that, these tools are not neutral. They're reshaping our behavior and our reality. And this is the second example focused back on academic publications. This shows the enormous increase in commentaries submitted to journals since ChatGPT was released. The same is true for letters to the editor. And the thinking here is that commentaries and letters to the editor don't require data. And researchers are simply, feeding published papers in and asking Gen AI programs to write commentaries and letters to the editor based on these papers. And again, you can see, I don't know what's going on with oral oncology, but in general, for the other journals, and this is also true of many other journals, this huge increase in these two types of submissions corresponds with ChatGPT's release, to the point where some journals have actually shut down submissions of commentaries and letters to the editor because there are just too many to handle and process. And there are many other examples of ways in which Gen AI has changed, what is published and how publishing is carried out. So that was a little bit of setup and introductory material, but I think, maybe now we can delve a bit deeper into ChatGPT's role in academic writing and editing. I'm going to move now to professional standards in using Gen AI for academic publications. probably all of you are familiar with the standard ICMJE authorship criteria for who counts as an author on academic papers. You could see the fourth criteria requires an author to be accountable for all the work in the paper, including the accuracy and the integrity of the work. Most author guidelines prohibit generative AI from participating as an author, largely based on this last criterion, because a computer cannot be held accountable for anything. And this is a section of the author guidelines from the journal Nature. I mean, you can see they prohibit using, including ChatGPT as an author, as we just discussed. And they also emphasize transparency by requiring documentation of any use of a large language model for the research or the writing. They want it in the methods, or could be in a different part of the suitable part of the paper. So other journals and COPE, Committee on Publication Ethics, are also in step with these guidelines and principles. So prohibiting, ChatGPT as an author and wanting transparency. And you may still have the question in your mind, is it okay to use AI for editing and even for writing an academic publication, even though ChatGPT shouldn't be listed as an author? So this is an excerpt from the American Journal of Preventive Medicine guidelines, and it mirrors what I have seen in other journals. There are no rules against using AI in manuscript preparation, but transparency, again, in declaring your use is key. And I'm not going to go through all the details now, but you can look at the slides after or go to the website. I also have later in the presentation, I have several examples of declarations from publications around their use of ChatGPT. So you could see what other people have done, and that comes a little bit later. Data privacy. No AI is risk-free in terms of data privacy. And I want to transition now to think about how you might minimize your data privacy risk in your own work with ChatGPT. So some of us have dedicated ChatGPT or other, sort of AI platforms, closed AI platforms at our institutions. University of Michigan has one. Our university does not participate in training the models, and they don't share user data with anyone. And I suspect that many of you also have dedicated platforms at your institutions. So if your institution does offer a closed platform, definitely use it because it's going to be more private compared to the open public version. At U of M and probably at other institutions, it would be fine from a data privacy standpoint to enter or upload your unpublished manuscript text into these closed versions. But regardless of whether you are using your institution's closed platform or a public platform, you really need to find out exactly, what the privacy policies are. The information on the University of Michigan website is not totally explicit, so I confirmed, with our Associate Chief Medical Informatics Officer that University of Michigan users should not be entering or uploading any study data, including de-identified data at this time because it's considered protected health information. However, they expect a new policy to be in place in the next few months that will allow us to enter de-identified data and other protected health information into U of M GPT. I just want to mention this. It might be a bit beyond our scope about writing with ChatGPT, but the question tends to come up in these talks, so I thought I would sort of address it proactively. But again, you really need to check your own institution's policies around privacy and what can and can't be entered. So this slide is about modifying your settings to enhance privacy. I used to, in earlier versions of this talk, I used to provide specific instructions, like a how-to for modifying your settings. But at this point in time, there really are too many versions, and they're also changing all the time. So to keep things streamlined and, sort of like up to date, I recommend that you look at the privacy settings in whatever version you're using and modify them, to protect your data. On the bottom of this slide, I included the link to the frequently asked questions about data privacy for OpenAI. If you're comfortable, you can also ask ChatGPT for help in changing the settings to better protect your privacy. Typically, options include things like enabling temporary chat mode, turning chat history off, turning the training setting off, and or turning memory off. So those are the types of settings that are, probably those are the settings you're going to modify to better protect your data privacy.
Ella, I saw a question from, I think Liz has her hand up.
Oh, yeah.
I was looking at in your previous slide where it says turning off training. As we keep on using a ChatGPT, then it has some training of the things that we wanted, right? And give us a little bit more tailored responses to what we are used to asking. If we turn training off, do you know if that disappear and it's just like asking a question like from the start and it doesn't keep this memory of the previous questions that we ask? So training tailored to our requests. I don't know how to ask.
Yeah,
that.
I think, are you asking whether it's, yeah, so what the turning training off is a more of a broad, it doesn't really necessarily pertain to your specific session that you're talking to ChatGPT. It's more like you paste your unpublished data into ChatGPT. So ChatGPT, all of large language models learn from, reading examples in text. So what ChatGPT wants to do is it wants to take that data that you pasted into it, your unpublished manuscript data, and it kind of wants to send it to OpenAI so the large language models can kind of broadly learn from that text. Okay. So basically what you're doing when you're turning off training, it's my understanding, and if someone has more sophisticated understanding, please feel free to share, but it's preventing OpenAI from taking what you pasted into it, the data that you shared with it, and using it for their training.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so assuming, you've modified the settings to better protect your privacy, if you do want to do some editing in the public version of the platform, there's a few additional steps you can take to protect your data privacy. First of all, avoid pasting your complete manuscript into ChatGPT. Instead, break it up. Only paste one section or chunk of text at a time. Turns out that it's sort of a win-win to do this because ChatGPT is actually better at working with smaller chunks of text anyhow. So you do lose a little bit, like you might lose a little bit of context from, it's looking at the methods and saying, wait, you didn't, you forgot something from the methods in your results. It's not able to respond to your document as a whole, but it actually, ChatGPT handles smaller chunks better, and it's a better idea from a data privacy standpoint. Another thing you can do is just to be on the safer side, if you're pasting your unpublished data into a public platform, remove your values. Like if you have odds ratios or point estimates or, percents, take those values out to further protect the privacy of your information. Okay. So those were some thoughts on data privacy, and I will circle back a bit and say a few more things about that later on. I want to shift gears a little bit now and share some strategies and examples for using ChatGPT in your academic writing. I'm putting writing feedback and editing in the same big bucket, since the procedure for both involves, sort of presenting your draft and getting writing suggestions from GPT. So there are many different ways to do things in ChatGPT. For writing feedback and editing, I'm suggesting using these 3 steps to work with the technology. First, train ChatGPT to help it understand what you want from it. What's the type of writing you're doing? Let it know what kind of feedback you want. Second, paste your text or upload it into ChatGPT. Third, if you didn't get the results you wanted, provide more specific information and try again. All right, so I want to now show an example of using ChatGPT to provide sort of like bigger picture feedback, like a peer review. So just like you would ask a colleague or a mentor to give you feedback on your draft, you can ask ChatGPT. And this can be a good first step after writing a rough draft before you show it to an actual human. I've led this activity with different groups, and many were understandably skeptical about the process. But many were also pretty amazed at how good some of the feedback was. And I have also been surprised, pleasantly surprised, and ChatGPT just keeps getting better. All right, so here's the example. The first thing you do is make your expectations as clear as possible on the front end. I would like you to take the role of an academic tobacco researcher who's providing a peer review for my abstract. Okay, so setting up that this is academic writing and style and tone and the type of feedback I'm looking for. And you can see here, ChatGPT is acknowledging what I want. Of course, please go ahead and share your abstract with me and I'll provide feedback as if I were a peer reviewer. Okay, so next, I'm telling ChatGPT, get ready. I'm going to give you an example of the type of writing I'm trying to achieve, and I want my paper to have the same style and tone as the example. And from its reply, it seemed to understand this. Certainly, share the example of writing, and I'll do my best to help you adjust your draft to match its style and quality. All right. So then I pasted text from a published abstract to give it a bit more training before I let it loose with my abstract. And ChatGPT reads a published example and offers a sort of like reflection of what it learned from the example. And I'm not going to read all this now, but it's a pretty on target here. So it gives me some confidence that I'm going to get helpful feedback. And then I paste text from my paper so it can give me feedback on it. And so for this particular example, since I'm not actually a tobacco researcher, I used another published abstract rather than a draft I wrote. And this is the abstract I pasted in, pretending it was mine. And the feedback it gave me was pretty good, actually. I've just included the feedback on the background section here as an example. ChatGPT suggested clarifying the research question, which is exactly what I would have suggested for this abstract. And it also gave the good advice to be clearer about the research gap. And I want to point out 2 additional things here. excuse me. First, it's important to realize that, as I said before, if you didn't get helpful information from ChatGPT, it does not mean that it will never be helpful. It means you have to keep working with it to give it more information until you get helpful output. For example, you can give it more information about the type of written product you want or the type of feedback you want. You can even feed it criteria for a good abstract. Second, you can see that even though I didn't ask it to, it's offering suggested revisions, and you don't need to take these, obviously. You could also tell it just to give you feedback without providing sort of like line-by-line revisions. In this case, for example, you could respond to these suggestions to clarify the research question, emphasize the research gap, just by revising the text yourself rather than pasting this entire paragraph written by ChatGPT. The more you rely on your own voice and prose, the better when revising your text. I also have this simpler example that asks ChatGPT for straight up copy editing rather than broader peer review feedback. And this example compresses the overview those 3 overview steps I gave into one simple prompt. And there are ways to make it much more specific, but I have been testing this simple prompt for academic writing, and it actually works pretty well. So copy edit this text for a scholarly journal, provide marked up changes in your output, and then paste the text in there. For this example, I just pasted in one sentence. Okay, so I used U of M GPT rather than the public version for this example. And it provided marked up edits, as you can see, in the sort of like right in the interface, which is a new feature for our U of M GPT, though it still can't generate a Word document with track changes. And so a few reflections about this example. First of all, if you think you're just going to copy edit your paper with GPT, catching spelling errors and typos, for example, in your mind, in reality, first of all, these kinds of errors tend to be caught by word processors or Google Docs, and tend to be resolved by the time you start working in ChatGPT. And it can be easy to get sort of sucked in when you use the platform. ChatGPT is a very enthusiastic editor. So, even if you just ask it, even if you use a fairly narrow prompt, it's still going to offer a lot of suggestions, a lot of writing suggestions. And that's partly why I changed the title of this talk from copy editing with ChatGPT to academic editing with GPT, a little broader. And then the other point I wanted to make about this example in this slide is that the public version now, GPT-5, can generate a Word document with track changes, which is, even more convenient for many of us than what U of M GPT can do. Track changes within the within the platform. Okay, so I've said a lot about data privacy, and it's not the only concern in using GPT. I'll just touch on a few other concerns here. By now, I think most of us are familiar with some of these, including accuracy, ChatGPT's tendency to hallucinate. It's gotten much better, but it still has issues. So last week I asked it for references to papers that used ChatGPT for data analysis in health studies. And it provided, a happy, enthusiastic list of papers and none of them were real. None of the citations were real. So that is still very much an issue that has not improved much over time. So avoid trusting facts or citations. And of course, it's also true that using ChatGPT to write a paper, that is like creating new text, can be problematic because it's not a primary source. So you won't be able to cite it as a reference. So this is something, of course, to keep in mind as well. Doing your own reading, generating your own content, and carefully reviewing each change it suggests will help you maintain control of the document. Additionally, ChatGPT is still, it's trained on data created by humans, and therefore it's not bias free. So to avoid, any impact of bias, again, be in charge of the paper and have the technology play the supporting role. And finally, ChatGPT is an enthusiastic editor. Again, I recently led a study comparing a human, Grammarly, and ChatGPT for copy editing academic text. And ChatGPT was like, fourfold more edits than on either of the other two approaches. And a lot of them are helpful changes. Sometimes it makes inappropriate changes that either change the meaning or make the text worse in some way, but it also makes a lot of what I call neutral changes. These sort of like fancy up the prose without really improving it. And again, here I would suggest, keeping control of your text and avoiding any changes that don't clearly improve the writing. On a very practical level, be sure you talk to your co-authors before using any AI technology, because people have still a wide range of opinions, and some people are really not comfortable at all using AI or having anyone on their author team use the technology. So this is a really good thing to put on your list to talk about with your colleagues and co-authors before anyone, sort of even, starts writing. Okay. So now I want to show some examples of declarations, just so you can see maybe it's like some of the norms and standards of how people are acknowledging use of ChatGPT. This is from a study, a pretty recent study, and all of these acknowledgments are of ChatGPT from published papers up to August of 2024. The authors looked in Scopus and Web of Science, and they found 1,759 publications with ChatGPT acknowledgments, and around 80% were related to editing and proofreading. 5.3% mentioned ChatGPT for data analysis or programming, and much fewer, I think it was like 3% or 3.5% of researchers acknowledged ChatGPT for drafting sections of the manuscript. All right, so these acknowledgments are related to, are examples of what they found in acknowledging ChatGPT for drafting and writing. So the authors acknowledged this article was partially generated by ChatGPT. The second one, we used ChatGPT for assistance in generating some of the written content in the abstract and conclusions, which we copy edited for correctness. And finally, the conclusion was created by GPT-4 on the basis of a summary also created by GPT-4. So it's a good idea to include the version of ChatGPT or whatever tool you're using, and that's missing in some of these. Sometimes journals want these in the methods section, and others want them in the acknowledgments. And then some other journals have like a specific dedicated section for AI declarations. And you just, need to look at the author guidelines to see what the journals require.
Alan, quick question for those.
Yeah.
How how helpful or I guess useful or meaningful do you think some of these are? I mean, I understand we want to, I guess, be transparent and declare, but it's almost like, should I declare that I used Word proofreading or like you said, Word or Google is gonna find typos and that's just like a standard tool, right? Or I mean, should I disclose that I wrote this thing using Word in a Mac? And so it's a little bit silly, right? Like
Yeah.
in the end, the conclusion was created by GPT and the basic summary also created by GPT. I mean that okay, sure, fine, but then I hope you read it and judge it critically, and it didn't end there, right? Like if I see that conclusion, it's like, okay, so ChatGPT, the third statement is like, are you telling me that you had no intellectual input into what this is? Or what is it, right? Like I find it a little bit of, yeah, maybe this is going too far. Again, I mean, was this thing completely written by ChatGPT? I mean, yes, I guess it'd be good to know, right? But are people going to disclose that? And is it worth it then to disclose any little or thing that we use it for? And sort of what sort of really makes it that's something worth actually disclosing versus we're just done understand what this is and we're just reacting in a silly way to just put stuff out there just because we can, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyhow, any thoughts about that, Rex?
Great. I thank you so much for those insights and questions. I really agree with what you're saying on some level. My feeling is that, or my opinion is that this is a new, transformative, game-changing technology that feels very scary to us. And we are not sure how it's going to change, so many things, science, writing, publishing, et cetera, et cetera. So because of the uncertainty around it, I think that the declarations and acknowledgments are meant to offset the unknown and scary aspect of this new technology. I think that makes it feel better in people's minds because so much is unknown. Like that's my take on why. And it can be, you can take, how far do you want to take it? It can get really out of hand. But I do think because of where we're at, it can help people kind of make their way through this uncertain time. And maybe, nobody is saying don't use AI, right? I mean, another point is that there's all these AI detectors, right? I mean, this is something that I've been thinking about lately. I've talked to a small handful of journal editors, and the big publishers are using AI detectors. And so one question in my mind is, why, if there's no explicit sort of rules against using AI, as long as you're transparent and you're expected to take responsibility for the content in your publications, then why are they even using AI detectors? And I think there's just a range of views on the technology, and there's people have different. One editor I talked to, he was at one of the Nature journals, very much embracing AI and wants people to write with AI, and it's really just the data that's important. And then another editor I talked to was just very, very, I wouldn't say he was resistant, but very cautious and, probably not the biggest fan of AI. And it's really up to their discretion, whether to, how to use that information from the AI detectors. But anyhow, hopefully that somewhat responds to your
Thank you.
to your
Yes,
comment.
thank you. I think that yeah, it's sort of we're afraid we don't know how to and it's one way of dealing with that fear and other things. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here's some
I
more.
just have a short follow-up question. I do think like these were not helpful. So none of those, it's almost like they shouldn't have written one. So are there recommendations that article provides, like how to be a little bit more transparent in a succinct manner in these declarations? So I mean, if I read those, I'd be like, okay, it is not telling me anything. What's the point? Like Raphael said. So is there a better way to do it?
Yeah, really, another really great question. I felt like this talk was getting really long, and I kept like adding things and then taking them out. There are several proposed tools for reporting to standardize our reporting of AI use in manuscript preparation. And I can send, I ended up taking it out because I felt like it was too much for this talk. But I think that's where this is heading. I think that we're just figuring these things out, right? Like we're having this discussion now and we're responding and looking at these acknowledgments and thinking to ourselves like, okay, well, what is this really accomplishing? And so slowly people are trying to make this more standardized, but there's a lot of discussion and thought around, what is the best way to be transparent and acknowledge. And so there are several tools right now that are being considered that I can send around some publications that are proposing different reporting tools, essentially that would be more standardized than what you're looking at now. And I think they can be helpful to us right now. I haven't seen any of the tools actually used in journals yet, but it's on the horizon. I think they're helpful to us now in sort of looking through the list. It's usually, I think it's like a checklist is usually what they are. And for us to kind of go through and are on our own, think about and be able to report, in some kind of standard way. So does that answer your question?
I think so. Like same thing. I don't use these tools, but I think that's one thing I worry about. When does it come to the level of I need to tell somebody I'm using it? And then what do I need to tell them? Because if I'm using it just for making my text clearer or shorter or something like that, is that really necessary to mention? But if I'm using it to, I don't know, generate an idea or something, or I don't know, evaluate, I don't know. When do I need to report? Analyze the data. I know maybe I need to report that because that's a software I'm using. So that's not really clear to me.
So anytime you use AI, it should be reported according to the journal guidelines, most journal guidelines. There are categories, and I think one standard category is brainstorming. You talked about generating ideas. Brainstorming is a typical category. Copy editing, writing, I mean, it's all kind of falls into a somewhat not very tidy bucket, but, I think, you could call it copy editing, text editing, et cetera, et cetera. That's kind of like one category. Data analysis. I think there are a lot of questions in my mind, even around how to report data analysis. So if you use ChatGPT to generate code, I think that's one thing. You're using R or whatever, SAS, and then it's clear. How R works, how SAS works, but ChatGPT and a lot of the Gen AI, I think it is a bit of a black box. Like if you're putting in your methods, like how reproducible is that? How is it even if it's actually analyzing your qualitative data, for example, like how is it actually doing that? We don't really know, right? So I think a lot of this is very unclear at this point. And, these are good questions for us to think about. But to answer your question at the most basic level, anytime you use AI, it should be reported, and just try to describe it as well as you can until these more standard tools take over, which I think is on the horizon. But thanks for those questions.
Yeah, I had one other follow-up question, Ella. We've mainly been talking about like using ChatGPT through the web browser, which that to me feels like it's a pretty obvious use of AI. You're clearly using it, but there are a lot of these tools now that are becoming more integrated. Like I have a Word document open and there's a Copilot tab just like in there. I use GitHub Copilot all of the time to help with coding. And so for some of these, I feel like we're going to reach a point where they're just so seamlessly integrated into the tools that we're using that it's not going to be clear if I use the spelling grammar feature in Word. Is this the typical spelling grammar feature, or is this going to be some Gen AI tool? So do you have any kind of tips for how we should be kind of thinking about like looking forward, the ways that these tools might be getting integrated into just our workflows, maybe without us even realizing?
Yeah, that is a really great point. And I don't think I really have a good answer for you or a good, sort of pearl of wisdom or where things are heading, because it is becoming less and less clear what technology we're using as it's integrated into more and more of our everyday software. So yeah, does anyone else have any thoughts on that or ideas, insights? It's a really great point. Okay, well let's keep thinking about that, and I'll let you know if I learn anything new on that front. Okay, and so then so you can kind of see these are different categories: text drafting, text editing, and brainstorming. Translation is another sort of standard activity, although I imagine if the line between translation and editing may not be completely clear. But that is another common use for generative AI. Okay. I added this in, as I said, I was adding things in, taking them out. I know that there are new digital accessibility requirements, new United States law coming in April, that we need to make our digital content accessible, and we should be adding alt text to our figures and photos and maps and other images in our academic writing and other writing as well. So alt text helps people with low vision or people who are blind to understand like what's in the image. So a blind person is using a screen reader to read a document, and they get to an image or a figure and there's no text there. So the screen reader doesn't know what is in that image or figure. So it's basically a text description embedded in an image or a figure that's read by a screen reader. At U of M, we have a new tool to help us write alt text. It turns out this so-called tool is really a script you can use in ChatGPT, and I believe it's accessible to anyone, even those outside U of M. So I used the script to generate alt text for this figure here. It generates a short, medium, and long version for each figure you use it for. And for this example, I don't know, maybe I'll just quickly show for those who may not be familiar, how to add alt text. So if I want to add alt text to this figure, you just right click. There's also a menu item you can choose, but on a PC here, you could choose view alt text, and then you really just paste it in here. If it's a decorative figure, you can check this little box. But anyway, this is, hopefully helpful for just making it a bit more efficient to generate your alt text for images for academic publications.
Yeah. If I could comment, because I mean, if you've never done it, maybe you didn't see the value. And maybe if you've done it and you had like 2 or 3 figures in your paper, maybe you're like, I mean, I can do it. And yeah, maybe it's going to save me a little bit of time. Or at least do it better than when I do a first draft that then someone is to approve, what have you. But yeah, I've been in cases where it's like, I don't know, hundreds of figures in a large report that needed alt text. And that was, for instance, a challenge. And I see these and I'm like, wow, this is super useful. This could really, for things, and it's great, right? Because we do have regulations and we need to have those alt text, and particularly for websites, things like that. I wanted to say thank you for sharing this one. I think it's pretty helpful. If you don't use them much, then you probably don't see it right away. But yeah, the time that you actually need it, you'll realize how valuable this could be. And I'm sort of trying to gather examples of like where ChatGPT or things like that might be very helpful, and others that maybe it's not that helpful, and people need to understand it's not helpful for that. But I think this is one that probably should go into. It could really be of a lot of assistance, right?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's possible. I mean, I'm not really coding, like really isn't my thing in programming, but like maybe someone, from this group would be able to put the script in and then just sort of upload the document and say, write the alt text for all of the figures in this document. I imagine there's probably a way to do that. To your point, I've been experimenting with this, and it tends to be good. First of all, you don't want to necessarily overlap too much with the figure. I mean, it depends on whether the figure legend is part of the image or if it's, being able to be read by the screen reader, but you don't want to overlap too much with this. But I found that this script is pretty good for data figures like this. I looked at a qualitative study with a photo. And this is a study of retail marketing of e-cigarettes in London. I felt like it would be relevant to your group. And the study, what it did was it took pictures, it used photos, and then it classified these ads into different categories. And so this figure is an example of an outdoor exterior e-cigarette advertisement. And, ChatGPT does a pretty decent job describing it, but, it misses context a lot. I mean, that's the one thing, it depends on, the quality is, uneven. And you might have to kind of tweak it a little bit. Like this first version talks about its e-smoking liquid, and that's not the point of this photo. The point is that this ad is an outdoor advertisement on the outside of a retail establishment. And then you could see this long version talks about the bright purple door frame, So it is uneven, but it can save time in getting the ball rolling, I guess. Any other comments on alt text or?
Proprietary.
Yeah, it's just that I noticed once I had written a training document for work in India, and my images all had alt text, and I had not put them there. So I was curious how they got there, and they were automatically put there by Word. And they were okay. Not the best, but I imagine that it's gotten better.
Well, I've been testing it in Word, And my testing, it's been pretty terrible, but I've been, Word and PowerPoint, I think in Microsoft. The testing I've done hasn't been very good. But I'm sure all of these are going to get so much better. But yeah, to your point, and I think it's, things are going to be, our documents and work is going to be just such a mix of different technology. And, like Copilot, like Chris had mentioned, I do think at a certain point it's going to be like, which technology, remembering and parsing that out is going to be pretty complicated.
Yeah, because MS, let's say the MS function that now added with Copilot for alt text, that seems to be just the same thing, right? Like, but it comes through MS, then maybe you didn't even think about it, right? It's just AI did it. It just yeah, and let's say it gets better, and you're like, okay, this looks good, and okay, it was generated by Word, but there was an AI agent or whatever LLM behind, and so yeah, I think these things are gonna get murky, and we're right now, I guess we're being very explicit. Part of that we don't understand, and we want to feel safer. But yeah, eventually we won't even realize that half of our job was done by an AI.
That's right. That's true. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So I guess we just need to stay vigilant as possible to really understand, and take responsibility for what's in our document. That's another part of this, to make sure we're checking everything carefully.
One more question, Ella, about the alt text. So earlier, when you were talking about the data privacy stuff, you sort of mentioned, you can get rid of your numbers in your abstract or whatever when you're feeding it into ChatGPT. How do you think about that with something like a figure, when you're uploading a figure and then asking it to create this alt text? That figure probably has all of your results, maybe.
Yeah,
that sort of seems like an area where like you can't really cover up the results in the figure, but also ask it to make alt text that explains the results.
Yeah, good point. I did this in the University of Michigan version, which I felt pretty confident. I think in terms of aggregated results, it's totally fine if you have a dedicated platform. I wouldn't upload my unpublished figure or table into the public version for sure. Yeah, good point.
Thanks.
Okay, so the final part of my talk gives tips on writing effective ChatGPT prompts. So as I've mentioned, getting good results from GPT really, it depends on your prompt skill, although, that said, it's less and less required to be giving good prompts. I think it's just getting better and better. But it's still helpful to be as precise as you can in your prompts. This is a helpful framework I found for creating effective prompts. First, give ChatGPT an identity, tell it what role to play. So do you want it to be a peer reviewer or a copy editor, et cetera, et cetera? Second, provide clear instructions on what you want it to do. For operation, for writing requests, you can think about this as the details about what types of feedback you want. Presentation, you need to guide it to give you advice for, academic, scholarly writing. You can feed it examples, as I said, to help it learn the type of writing you want. And again, refinement, the process is iterative. So if you are unsure about how to craft a prompt, you can ask ChatGPT to prompt you. So here's an example. I want to copy edit a project proposal, but I'm not sure how to give you the right details. Can you ask me the questions you need to copy edit my proposal draft? So there's a video on, it's kind of long, it's 13 minutes, but this guy from Stanford made a video on how to do this, and the link is at the bottom in case you're interested in checking it out. And the more guidance you can provide, the better. This is another example here. I added the guidelines from the Target Journal to help it further tailor its feedback. And this additional information really does help ChatGPT improve, like things you might take for granted with a human. Sometimes you need to tell that to ChatGPT to help it understand what you want. And you can even tell it things like avoid abbreviations and causal language. Like, sometimes it gets confused, but I'm also sometimes really surprised at how much it does know. I asked it if it knew what causal language is, and it gave me a very sophisticated answer about citing the Bradford Hill criteria. And, maybe it shouldn't have taken me by surprise, but it did. And, might it stumble trying to identify causal language in practice? Absolutely, but probably worth the effort to specify if there's certain things in your writing that are important to you and that you're trying to work on and catch. These are just examples to show, you could keep at it and provide a lot of guidance and to ask for clear, specific tasks. So I think we already kind of talked about this, but, there's a lot of other ways in which you can use ChatGPT for academic writing. Translation's a big one, and I didn't give any examples. But brainstorming is another one. Summarizing, it is very good at summarizing. Writing cover letters, and you can follow the steps and examples to try these ones on your own. So here's some, kind of a summary of what we talked about. Be sure to be in touch with, the professional standards of COPE and journal requirements about authorship and what is and what is not, permitted, as this invariably will change over time. Keep an eye on your data privacy. Transparency is key. Communicate with your co-authors. Maintain control. ChatGPT is your assistant. And then be prepared to iteratively work with it to get the results that you want. So that is the end of my prepared talk. And I'm happy to take more questions or to hear your more of your insights or ideas.
I had another question, Ella. So thinking about the causal language piece, like I find this is definitely somewhere that I've found, or like scientific, sort of this specific nature of scientific writing that ChatGPT struggles with. Like it wants to say that everything is significant all the time. And I'm always like, only use significant in terms of like statistical significance. And
Yeah.
but I'm curious, when you will kind of keep working in one chat or if you'll switch to another chat. Because sometimes I find like it gets sort of caught up in whatever thing it was doing. So if it made a mistake earlier and you've asked it to correct it, it might correct it, but then sort of go back to that earlier stuff if you're still working in the same chat. I don't know if that's something you've noticed.
Yeah.
Others have. And if you have tips on kind of when you think about, okay, I want to keep this in the same chat that I've been working with versus moving over to a new one.
There are ways you can customize it. Like I have ChatGPT call me Dr. August and, really try to set it up as like, I'm this academic and I have an academic identity and this is how we're going to talk to each other. And I'm trying to remember the name of the setting, but there are ways you can like customize. And I don't know, like without trying it, but I wonder if you could change the setting, that customization somehow with some basic rules that you always wanted to follow. That could be one option. I don't know. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on that? It's a great point. Just like some basic standards for.
I've seen it. There's times where it said, hey, "Do you?" So I give it something, and it says, "Okay, here is a new proposal. Do you want?" And it starts asking you, right? Do you want me to make it even more technical? Do you want me to make it more like the standard? And sort of what I've learned a little bit, like at some point you have to just let it go. Like then you have to take it and I guess put it to your own taste. I mean, it'd be nice if it would write like you from the beginning, but maybe that's where it's the maybe helps you not try to push it to get exactly to be your writing, but yeah, just use it to get it to a point where then you can take it and I guess yeah. Make it as you like, and maybe yeah, but that would be my practical suggestion, right? Like yeah, that there's probably not the if you think about the net gain, it's probably at the beginning there's a lot where you maybe give a very rough draft and they give you something that it's better and readable and things like that, and then any subsequent iteration is probably gonna give. I mean, the gain that you get in terms of improvement is much less, and so, yeah, it's yeah. I guess efficiency. You should think about it that way, right? Like at some point, uh, uh, it's probably not worth it, right? Even your time to ask it to do something. There's a comment there. Sorry, Ella, and just a question from Emma.
Emily?
Yeah, there's a few things in the chat. Looks like Esther's comment is
Emily asked a question
relating to this, but yeah, Emily has a question, Steve.
I'm going to use it. I'm really interested in using AI this way, but I have colleagues who are very concerned about AI negatively impacting the environment or taking jobs. Do you have any suggestions for responding to that? I mean, I think that probably those two things are happening. AI is changing a lot of things, both negatively maybe and positively. And I think it's changing our landscape with respect to, research, our own, industry. I'm not sure suggestions in responding to that. I'm not sure I have any suggestions in responding to that. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that? I'm a little. That's a big comment.
I mean, Ella, it's a little bit of like what we were talking about right before this workshop, that the reality is that it is being used and probably going to be used more and more. And so I think part of it might just be educating folks about it if they're just really like having this event, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things that I also am concerned about, I think the environmental impact, I think they might be referring to
the electricity and water.
Pollution, electricity, heat, data centers.
Oh, that's a huge problem.
I think it's huge. Even I don't know how much energy it takes to edit a document. Is it enough equal to going to the grocery store in my car? I don't know. So I guess that is something to be mindful of as just
and maybe to that point is like to that point is like you maybe comment. I like your comment, Ella, about having conversations with your co-authors and maybe some rules. This is how we're going to use it. We agree. Then that brings some clarity. The second is, I mean, try to use it efficiently, right? Don't use it for every little thing. And again, like you said, sort of neutral changes. And there's one point where the thing got as good as it could. And then now it's really more about, is it actually true what it's saying? And yeah, can you take it? And so maybe yeah, use it with some I guess discretion, right? And yeah, as just for the things that you need and where it gives you the most benefit. So those
Yeah. Thanks for those thoughts. Yeah. I'm concerned that if we use ChatGPT helping us edit our work, we may inadvertently increase plagiarism concerns. For example, if we upload a paragraph and they improve the quality of the writing, it's possibly they're just using the words that have been published in other work.
Steve, you can chime in verbally if you want. You don't have to type it in.
I do like to lurk in the background. It's my it's a superpower. But yeah, like this is something I think about. Like if you were to, and I've played around with it a little bit, and it can make our like mediocre text sound really good, really fast. And my concern, because it's using like pre-existing knowledge that other people are typing in, isn't it possible that it's just going to like, maybe I'm going to take like a paragraph from like Raphael's really nicely written paper without knowing you're doing it, because it's actually just copy editing your same idea. And I would actually like, I don't know how easily we can access things like turnitin.com, but if I were to like take a changed paragraph, I would like to really know how much it impacted that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So my understanding is, so our concept of plagiarism has evolved and changed since ChatGPT was released. My understanding is ChatGPT is not using the training information and verbatim, just sort of spitting it out. It places words next to each other based on the probability that they would go together in a particular context. So if you ask ChatGPT 10 times to write with a specific writing request, it will give you 10 different paragraphs. So if we're thinking about plagiarism in terms of the sort of old school definition of like, oh, here's a paper and look at this other paper. It's copied verbatim, the exact same text. There's not really an original document per se to compare it to. So I think that the plagiarism detectors, is my understanding, are not being tripped by people who are using AI. The AI detectors are being tripped by people who use AI through these sort of telltale words like delve and other sort of characteristic ways in which ChatGPT and other AI tends to write. So I think if you were concerned about Gen AI impacting your writing in some way, I would be steering you toward looking at an AI detector rather than a plagiarism detector.
Right.
But yeah.
No, thanks. That's really useful. I have a second question that's kind of a follow-up. I know in one of your first slides, you showed us like the increase in like AI detected work over time and how it's gone up systematically. I would like to know the proportion of people who are actually citing AI as a tool over time, and if it's going up proportionately, because what I guess is happening is that like we have this explosion in AI use, and only a minority of those people are actually reporting using AI.
Yeah. I think all of those things are going up. It's not clear. Like I've never seen a study like we looked at the AI to see, we looked at the text to see if it would look like it was generated by AI. Then we looked at the acknowledgments to see if they acknowledged. We have like 3 types of data that I've seen. Like we have attitudes about acceptability to people of using AI. And then we have, these sort of declarations. And then we have like the AI detecting data of the actual objective data. So, it seems like they're all moving in the same direction. And I'm guessing people's acknowledgement of using AI is going to increase as they become more comfortable with the technology and it becomes more acceptable. I do think those more standard reporting tools are going to also help, because this is kind of like the Wild West right now. And especially if you're writing your own, I mean, some people were reporting the version, it's like all different. So I think that that's going to change over time. Yeah. My experience is that the more background information you can provide to the tool, rules and yes, 100%. The more background information and training and examples you can provide to like ChatGPT and other tools, the better. 100%. That's going to be helpful. The environmental impact is an issue. Yeah, I just read something about Mexico. These big power centers moving into parts of Mexico, using up the water, using up the electricity, and I think politically, that's maybe some action we can take and keep track of what's going on, and advocate for. That they support the communities where they're moving into is one thing for sure. But yeah, they're working on things. I know, like they need a huge amount of water to keep the equipment cool for those big processors or whatever they're called. And I think they're looking into like recycling water now, and they're working on improving that. But definitely, it's still a major issue. Ritesh, did you want to? I can kind of go back.
I have a more like a brass tacks question. I don't use this stuff very often. I just use it a couple of times for just messing around. Can you have I write multiple things at the same time many times, right? We're writing many pieces. Is it possible to have multiple sessions? Like have one session going where it remembers what I'm doing in that stream of thought, and I have another session going and it knows that stream of thought and doesn't get confused by those things? Is that how it works, or is that not how it works?
Yeah, I often have. Well, I use ChatGPT a lot for recipes, to scale recipes, and like, oh, I want to make a whatever pound batch of hummus, and I have this recipe for this much, and can you scale it for me? And I want to keep that open. But then I have another tab where I'm asking it something about academic writing, or alt text. Like I have an alt text one going right now. So like very different activities. So yeah, it's very easy. I tend to use the U of M GPT, but you have in your little history, there's like a panel on the left with different, almost like conversations you're having. And I think those do clear out after a certain number of days. I'm not sure if there's a way to keep those around longer. Does anyone know? Seems like after 30 days or something, sometimes they disappear. But there is a way to change your history, the way you keep your history or clear it out. So maybe it's possible that you could change the setting on that. But yeah, for sure, you could keep those threads going. Yeah. So here's a Nature article on AI and academic research. Yeah. So Steve just gave a link to this. Low quality papers based on public health data are flooding the scientific literature. For sure, this is happening a lot. And I think that, one important principle to keep in mind is just, be responsible for your papers. No matter how you use AI, you're the final say on, how the paper gets developed and what you submit to the journal. So these low quality papers, I imagine it's like ChatGPT spitting out a paper and people aren't editing it and really taking responsibility for the content. Thanks for sharing that. Other comments or questions?
Maybe a question. I know this may have a long answer, but I'm curious, sort of what are you doing? Just, I guess, thinking about where you are at University of Michigan School of Public Health, HEPI department. How are you, what are the roles with students in classes, and sort of how are you training them? or what are you telling them to your students that are going through the programs, and what how to use it, if anything, or what are the rules or guidelines that maybe they should follow as they go out to the world? Any comments on that, or specific things that Michigan is doing you share?
Well, I can say a few things and then maybe hand it off. I haven't been teaching the past few years. So, what I did, and I mean, teaching writing classes, I really just tried to bring it into my class. And I showed students how to get peer feedback from ChatGPT. And I also asked them to kind of think through and report to me how they were using the technology. I know other, instructors are, doing old school, kind of writing by hand in their classes, activities. But I haven't been keeping as close track the past few years. Ritesh or David Mendez, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I mean, I think you know how it is here. We try to give the instructor freedom how to run their classroom, including the AI stuff. So I think there's some general kind of guidelines on language you can use in your syllabi, and we get to decide what we want to do. I think what I do in my classes, I say AI is here. We should all learn to use it. I am a novice. I will allow you can use it for the classwork if you like. I just require that you submit your prompts, the original input and the output, and the changes you made. So it's more work for me to grade, but to be honest, no student has submitted that to me yet. And it's been 2 years since I've done that. So I believe what's happening is they're using it, but still not reporting it, just like what Steve said. So, uh, anyways, that's kind of been my experience. In my department, we kind of take this road that everybody's idiosyncratic. Like Ella said, there's some of us who just don't like it, hate it actually, and avoid it. And some of us who are like me, who are just kind of interested in it, but just worried about it and just don't want to take on the challenge of learning it yet. So I think the way we are responding as a school of public health and department is let the faculty figure it out, but provide some guidance.
And is anyone training the faculty? You said you're a novice. I guess we all started, and they saying she's not an expert in ChatGPT. If in my class, I'm thinking that's why I asked the question for my class. I'll be teaching in January. What am I going to do? And probably I'm going to start by saying something to that effect. But like to Emily's point, there seems to be maybe a generational disconnect where maybe younger generations are pretty comfortable using it. They may not even think about it. And there's all us, like older folks, which may be more skeptical, much more ignorant, of course. And so there's a barrier, in terms of like maybe how young folks are trying to I guess engage with the more senior people in how to use it effectively, right? And how to have this conversation. So is there any training that you're getting, or I guess if you notice there was a lot of quote unquote senior folks.
You remember
in training here.
Frederic does trainings. I don't know how many people are going.
Who has like that?
Frederic, the dean's office does provide on the the instructional support and training that the school provides our
Nice.
teachers.
And ITS periodically gives some seminars about AI. The business school trains the faculty with seminars about AI, and LSNA too. We don't do much in the School of Public Health, and as Ritesh said, is you figure it out, right? So you have to develop your own policies. What we know, at least on in HMP, is that all the alumni that are employers of our students are saying that the students who cannot use effectively AI are going to be out of the market. So they want our students, to keep up with. What they are interested is in results. If you can give the result that is high quality in a fraction of the time, that's what they are interested in, right? So, and they are very clear about that. On my part, I just tell the students, learn as much as you can about AI, use it as much as you can, because that's going to be the environment that you're going to be living in. And there's absolutely, no question about that. I mean, you need to know what we are producing is sound. You need to know the principles. You need to recognize that what you're outputting, the output that you are putting out is right. But no need to constrain yourself. And so that's the competitive advantage that at least our board of how do you call the advisory board of the department is concern is looking at. Yesterday, 2 days ago, we had a visit from the Google executive and at the university, and there was a round table, and they were talking about Google Growth, which is part of Google that promotes education and the whole 9 yards. And so we had like a round table of faculty across the university, and it was a Babel tower about how the university is using AI, because there's no real policy for anything, and the use and the permissions to use AI vary widely across U of M. So there's absolutely no central policy, and I don't think it should be a central policy given all the different constituencies that we have, and the different trainings or different type of students that we have. What we are planning to do is have a forum where people from different schools can go and say, this is what we're doing, this is what we're learning, this is where we are now, so people can disseminate that information and go back to their units. But that's about it right now.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
think we're
we're at time here. So thank you very much, everyone, for your great discussion and comments and questions. And I will work with Molly to distribute the materials in an email. So thank you.